Hey everyone, welcome to Mr. Rainy Night. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, get comfy, relax, and let's begin. There's a stretch of I-90 near the Montana-Idaho border that most truckers pass without a second thought. I wish I had done the same. It was around 3:30 in the morning when I pulled into an empty rest area, just a quick stop to fix a strap and use the bathroom. But what I experienced inside that dim, silent building still haunts me. I thought I was alone. I was wrong. And the worst part? No one will believe what happened next. The night had been long but uneventful. I was on my way to Portland, cruising through the winding mountain highway under a sky full of stars. The hum of the engine, the rhythm of the road. It was almost calming. Then I noticed one of my load straps had come loose. Not a big deal. I'd fix it quickly, maybe take a bathroom break, and be back on the road in minutes. The rest area appeared like a ghost out of the trees, dimly lit, isolated, dead quiet. There was only one other truck in the lot, parked near the end with its curtains drawn tight. No movement, no lights. Whoever was inside was clearly asleep. I pulled into a spot, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cool spring air. But the second my boots hit the ground, I noticed it. The cold. Not just spring chill, but a sudden, unnatural drop in temperature. The kind that bites through your jacket and settles in your bones. It hadn't felt like that a moment ago. I shook it off, probably just the elevation or the time of night. I walked around to the back of the trailer and tightened the strap. As I turned to head toward the building, that's when I saw it. A shadow in the window. At first I thought it was my reflection, but it moved. Not with me, but independently. A tall, vague silhouette that shifted sideways and vanished from view the moment I looked directly at it. I froze. My first thought was logical. It must have been the driver from the other truck. Maybe he'd gone in to use the restroom too. Maybe the glass just played tricks on my eyes. That's what I told myself as I walked toward the building. But something felt wrong. The air felt heavier with each step. The lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow over the pavement. Every instinct told me to turn around, get back in the truck, and drive. Strap be damned. But I kept walking, because logic still had the wheel. That wouldn't last much longer. The door to the rest area creaked slightly as I pushed it open. Immediately, a suffocating silence hit me. Not the peaceful kind. This was unnatural, like sound itself had been sucked out of the air. I paused in the doorway, heart beating a little harder now, straining to hear anything. A distant hum, the buzz of a light fixture, maybe footsteps from the other trucker. But there was nothing. You could have heard a pin drop from across the building. I took a breath and stepped inside. The layout was strange. Unlike most rest stops with rows of stalls, this one had a series of small individual bathrooms with locking doors, almost like little private closets. The hall was dim, with dull tile floors and walls that echoed every footstep. I chose one of the single restrooms at random, entered, and locked the door behind me. As I stood at the urinal trying to shake the uneasy feeling crawling down my spine, I heard it. A loud rattle from the outside hallway. It sounded like a janitor's cart, wheels clunking awkwardly across uneven tile, metal tools clinking with every bounce. That would have been strange enough on its own. But then came the knock. No, not a knock. Someone yanked the handle. Hard. The door jolted against the lock as if someone was trying to come in, even though I had only entered seconds earlier. My first reaction was irritation. I muttered, "Occupied," under my breath, but it came out dry and uneasy. Something about the pull felt too aggressive, too rushed, like whoever was out there didn't care if the door was locked or not. Then it got worse. Without warning, every toilet in the building began to flush, one after the other, rapid, chaotic. The sound roared through the pipes like a rolling wave. I stood frozen, still at the urinal, trying to process what I was hearing. There was no way someone could have activated them all manually. There weren't enough people here for that. In fact, I hadn't seen a single person since I pulled in. Panic crept in. My breathing became shallow, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. I reached for the door latch, but just as I touched it, everything stopped. The toilets, the rattling, the air itself seemed to freeze in place. Dead silence again. I hesitated, hand still on the lock. I didn't want to open the door. Every part of me said, don't. But something else pushed me to look, to confirm that this wasn't just in my head. So I opened it, slowly, and peeked out into the hallway. It was empty. No cart, no footsteps, no sound. I even checked a few of the other bathroom doors. Each one was unoccupied. My heart was thudding in my ears, but even that felt muted against the overwhelming silence pressing in around me. Something was wrong with this place, and it wasn't done with me yet. I stood there, just outside the bathroom, staring down a hallway that seemed too quiet, too still, like time had stopped moving. My instincts screamed that I needed to leave, but a strange part of me kept searching for an explanation. I couldn't accept that what I'd just experienced might have been something unnatural. Still, I walked softly along the corridor, trying not to make noise. I checked a few more bathroom stalls, cracked open some of the individual doors. Each one was completely empty. Not a single footprint, not a sound, not even the faintest trace of someone having been there. Just cold tile and silence. That rattling janitor cart? Gone. No sign of it. No maintenance closet nearby. No wheeled equipment that might have made that noise. The layout was too small for someone to have slipped out without me noticing. And yet, there was no one. I stepped back into the common area, and that's when I felt it. A pressure. Not physical, but atmospheric. Like the air had thickened around me. Every inch of my skin prickled. I turned slowly, scanning every corner, every shadow, my breath shallow and uneven. That's when I knew. I wasn't alone. I couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it. But I knew. Something was watching me. Something was aware of me. Not curious, not playful, but deliberate, intentional. Like it was letting me feel its presence just long enough to break my nerves. The moment broke when I heard a soft creak from behind me. Not mechanical, not the building settling, but a deliberate, slow sound, like someone shifting their weight on old linoleum. I didn't look. I couldn't. I turned and bolted toward the exit, forcing my legs to move even as the panic rose like a flood in my chest. I didn't stop to glance back, didn't slow down to question the logic. Every step felt like I was being chased by something I couldn't name. As I pushed through the doors back into the night air, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But the dread didn't stop there. I was halfway down the sidewalk, heading back to my truck, when one of the overhead streetlights above me flickered, then snapped off entirely. Darkness dropped like a curtain. I froze under the sudden shadow, staring up at the now dead bulb. My breath clouded in the air, and for a brief second, I felt like I had stepped into another layer of reality, one where I didn't belong. That was it. I ran. Dead sprint. No shame. I practically dove into the cab of my truck, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I sat there panting, staring straight ahead with my hands clenched on the wheel. And then I checked my phone. No signal. No bars. No data. Nothing. That was the final nail. Whatever was happening here, I was cut off. Alone. And all I could do was get the hell out before it decided to follow. I didn't wait another second. The truck roared to life beneath me as I twisted the key with shaking hands. I threw it into gear and peeled out of the rest area lot like something was chasing me. Because in that moment, it felt like something was. The road ahead was empty, but I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see that dark figure from the window standing under the broken streetlight, or worse, running behind me. But nothing was there. Still, the feeling didn't leave me. That overwhelming sense that I had stepped into something I wasn't meant to see, or worse, something that wasn't meant to see me. The silence, the flushing toilets, the cold air, the shadow in the glass, all of it had felt calculated, like it had been waiting, watching, playing. When I finally got far enough down the highway for a signal to return, I didn't call anyone. I couldn't. What would I even say? Hey, I stopped at a haunted rest area and almost pissed myself in terror because invisible toilets flushed and a ghost shut off a streetlight? They'd laugh. I'd laugh, if it didn't still make my skin crawl every time I remembered it. Instead, I kept driving. Later that week, out of curiosity, I looked the place up on Trucker Path, a kind of Yelp for drivers app we all use on the road. I wanted to see if maybe someone else had experienced what I had. Most reviews were boring. Clean enough, good lighting, no vending machines. But buried near the bottom was one review that had been upvoted dozens of times. It was just one word: ghosts. I stared at it for a long time, hands cold on my phone screen. Someone else had felt it. Someone else had been there, seen something. Maybe they didn't tell the full story. Maybe, like me, they figured no one would believe them anyway. There were also a few photos of the area, quiet, peaceful during the day. But in one of them, way in the background, I spotted a small cluster of white roadside crosses, the kind that marks where people have died. I'd missed them entirely that night. But now, I couldn't help but wonder, had the rest area always been like that? Or had something made it that way? People say the road is lonely. They're right. But sometimes what's worse than being alone is realizing you're not. Not when the world should be sleeping. Not when the air turns cold without warning. Not when the laughter or footsteps or shadows show up with no explanation. I haven't stopped at that rest area since. I don't plan to. And if you ever find yourself driving west on I-90 near the Montana-Idaho line around 3 a.m., keep going, even if you really need to stop. Whatever's there, it's waiting. I've been driving long enough to know when something isn't right. It was a Thursday night, just past 11:30 p.m., and I was cutting through the Appalachian Mountains. My windows were rolled down to let in the cool forest air. The road was quiet, winding through thick woods that swallowed up the moonlight. I had one hand on the wheel, the other holding my headset mic close, chatting with my girlfriend to stay awake. We'd just started talking about vacation plans for the summer when it happened. A smell hit me. It wasn't the usual forest scent. No pine, no earth, no diesel. It was soap. A strong, clean, chemical-like soap. Like the kind you'd find in a hospital or an old motel restroom. It swept through the cab in a sudden, unmistakable wave. Sharp, intrusive. I flinched and pulled away from the wheel slightly, startled. "You okay?" my girlfriend asked in my ear. "Yeah," I said slowly, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. I think I drove through something. Smells like soap. Really strong." I looked out both sides. Nothing. Just trees and darkness. Then I heard it. Laughter. At first it was distant, like it came from somewhere outside the truck. A group of women, giggling, almost playfully. Not mocking, not manic, just unsettling. It didn't fit. It was the kind of laughter you'd hear in a bar bathroom or a slumber party. Not alone on a deserted mountain road in the middle of the night. "Hold on," I muttered, cutting off my girlfriend as I started rolling the windows up. The moment the glass sealed, the laughter didn't fade. It stayed. Same volume, same tone, like it was inside. The cab was sealed now, but the sound didn't change. No muffling, no echo. It was as if the laughter had followed me inside. I checked behind my seat. Nothing. Glanced at the passenger side. Empty. "You're being quiet," my girlfriend said. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied, though my heart was hammering in my chest. I could feel it pounding through my hands on the steering wheel. The soap smell was still there too, almost stronger now, like it was embedded into the air. I turned off the Bluetooth call. I didn't want her to hear whatever might come next. For the next mile, the laughter stayed with me, not growing louder, not quieter, just present, persistent, like something had taken a seat in the back and found something hilarious about my growing panic. I considered pulling over, but every instinct in me screamed not to stop. Don't give it the opportunity. Don't open the door. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The laughter cut off mid-giggle. The smell vanished. Silence. The road looked the same. Still forest. Still winding. But it felt colder, heavier somehow, like something had passed through and left a dent in the atmosphere. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd picked up a passenger, and somewhere along that stretch of road, it had decided to get off. But not before it made sure I knew it had been there. I didn't sleep the next day. Even after my haul was finished, I sat in my cab at the truck stop. Engine off, windows up, trying to make sense of what happened. No explanation came. Just that sound echoing in my head, the soft, steady giggling of something unseen, and the overwhelming scent of something that shouldn't have been there. Some people say the forest plays tricks on your mind. Others blame stress, fatigue, overwork. Maybe they're right. But I wasn't tired, and I wasn't alone. There's a small grocery warehouse off a rural highway that most truckers talk about in hushed voices. It looks ordinary from the outside, just another late-night drop-off spot. But those who've delivered there know something isn't right. Whispers in the shadows, cold spots that move, and sightings of a man sitting silently on top of the industrial fridge. I didn't believe any of it, until the night I heard a voice when no one was around, and found something on the floor that shouldn't have been there. Truckers share stories, most of them exaggerated, born from boredom, long miles, and late nights. But there was one tale I kept hearing that always ended with lowered voices and nervous glances. A grocery distribution center tucked away near a forgotten stretch of highway. Everyone called it that haunted store. And while I used to roll my eyes, saying ghosts don't stock shelves, something about the way people talked, the unease in their eyes, always stuck with me. I'd been driving for years, seen it all. Fog so thick it swallowed the road, highways iced like glass, even a moose that stared through my windshield like it could read my thoughts. But I had never been afraid of a delivery stop. That changed the first time I pulled up to that place. It was just past 2 a.m. when I arrived. The store was closed, the lot bathed in pale orange from flickering sodium lights. Shadows stretched long and thin across the asphalt, and the loading dock sat like a black mouth waiting to swallow my trailer whole. I stepped out, slammed the door behind me, and immediately felt it. A pressure. Not wind, not cold, just a presence, like I was being watched. The air was still, but it had weight. Inside, the place was silent. Too silent. Usually, these places hum with the buzz of refrigerators or the low whine of backup power. But here, it was like stepping into a vacuum. I wheeled my first pallet to the back cooler and, out of the corner of my eye, thought I saw someone sitting on top of the fridge. A man in a flannel shirt, legs swinging over the edge. I turned to look. Nothing. I told myself I was tired. Maybe I was. But then, as I unloaded the second pallet, one of the night stalkers, a guy with bags under his eyes and jittery hands, whispered something strange. Don't stare too long at the glass doors. Sometimes he stares back. I chuckled awkwardly, waiting for him to laugh too, but he didn't. He just wheeled his cart away and didn't look back. It was just a place, a store like any other. But by the time I rolled the final pallet toward the walk-in freezer, my chest was tight, my steps slowed, and the air? It felt heavier. The lights above flickered once, twice, then stayed dimmer than before. And I swear, I heard it. Footsteps, not mine. Slow, deliberate, following just behind me. I spun around. Nothing but rows of shelving and pale light. No movement, no wind. But I wasn't alone. And the worst part? I knew deep in my bones, something in that building wanted me to know it was there. I tried to shake the feeling off, told myself it was just the long hours, the silence playing tricks on my mind. I'd been on the road for days. A little paranoia wasn't out of the question. But as I pushed the last pallet across the slick floor, something happened that no amount of exhaustion could explain. I had just reached the back of the store, near the freezer section, when I heard it. A voice, soft, male, close. Hello. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even loud. Just a casual, almost friendly greeting, spoken as if someone were standing right behind me. I froze. Not out of fear, not yet, but confusion. The kind that makes your brain scramble to place the sound into something logical. I turned around slowly, expecting to see a worker, maybe someone who had just come from the back room or another aisle. No one. The loading area behind me was completely empty. My truck idled outside, the doors wide open, and yet the words still echoed faintly in my ears like it had come from just a few feet away. Hello. It hadn't been my imagination. I knew that. It was too distinct, too close. I stood there for what felt like minutes, heart thudding in my ears, eyes scanning every shadow in the store. The ceiling lights above flickered again, this time pulsing like a dying heartbeat. That's when I noticed it. Something small on the floor, just a few feet away from the pallet jack. A coin, silver, perfectly round. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I would have seen it when I pushed the pallet through. And it wasn't just lying there. It was placed, dead center in the aisle. No nearby shelves had spilled anything, and nothing had fallen. There was no reason for that coin to be there. I stared at it, unmoving. Something cold creeping down my spine. It wasn't the coin itself that scared me. It was the impossibility of it. Like the voice, it had come from nowhere, deliberately. I didn't pick it up. I didn't want to touch it. Instead, I backed away slowly, suddenly hyper-aware of every sound around me. The hum of old lights, the soft creak of settling shelves, and something else. A hush. A quiet that felt active, like it was listening. As I turned my back to head toward the exit, the lights above the freezer aisle buzzed louder, and I felt the unmistakable pressure of eyes on me. Heavy, fixed, watching. Not curious, angry. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed to get out. I left the final receipt unsigned, jumped into the cab of my truck, and slammed the doors shut with shaking hands. Even as I pulled away, I didn't glance in the mirrors. I didn't want to see if something, or someone, was standing at the loading dock. I just wanted to be gone. The silence in my cab was deafening as I drove away, headlights slicing through the darkness of the empty highway. But even with the road stretched out ahead, the store clung to me like a shadow that refused to fall behind. I tried to turn on the radio, anything to break the weight of what I'd just experienced, but every station was static. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something, someone, seated in the trailer, watching. Sleep didn't come easy that night. When it did, it was restless, haunted by looping images. That coin on the floor, the flickering lights, the voice. Hello. Friendly, but wrong. Too calm. Too close. The next day, I told myself not to talk about it. The guys would just laugh, chalk it up to highway fatigue. But curiosity gnawed at me. I brought it up casually over coffee at the next truck stop. I didn't even finish the story before one of the older drivers, Dale, set his mug down a little too hard. "You were at Coldwell Grocer's, weren't you?" he asked. I blinked. "Yeah? You've been there?" He nodded slowly. "Twice. Second time, I didn't get out of the truck." Another guy chimed in, Ron, usually the joker of the group. "Place is wrong. Something watches you, every time. First time I was there, I thought I saw a man sitting on top of the freezer unit. Looked like he was waiting." They all had stories, Boxes that moved on their own, whispering in the aisles, the sensation of being followed down a completely empty row. One guy swore he'd seen the same coin, same exact placement, right in the middle of the floor. But every time someone picked it up, their radio would cut out or their truck wouldn't start for hours. None of them had ever seen the man clearly, just shadows, outlines, suggestions of presence where there shouldn't be any. But they all agreed on one thing, the feeling, that unbearable pressure in the air, like walking into a place you're not welcome, like being inside a home that doesn't belong to the living. I asked why nobody reported it, why the company still sent deliveries there. Dale just shrugged. You think corporate cares about ghosts? They care about contracts, timetables. There was a long pause before Ron muttered something I won't forget. Place doesn't want us there, and every time we go back, it gets a little angrier. That night, I reviewed my dashcam footage from the delivery. Most of it was uneventful, grainy footage of me unloading, static sounds. But when I froze the frame just after I heard the voice, there it was. A figure, faint and barely formed, standing in the aisle, head tilted, watching. I shut the laptop and shoved it under the bed. Some things aren't meant to be studied too closely, especially the ones that don't want to be seen. I never went back to Coldwell Grocers after that night. I told dispatch I wouldn't do the route anymore, made up an excuse about engine trouble or scheduling conflicts. They didn't push back. Maybe they'd heard it before, but the story didn't end just because I stopped showing up. Other drivers kept whispering about strange events. One guy, someone new, took my shift a few weeks later. He'd laughed when I warned him, called me superstitious, said ghosts weren't real. But when he showed up the next morning, he looked like he hadn't slept, wouldn't even take his sunglasses off inside. Just sat in the break room staring into his coffee, mumbling something about a man crouched in the freezer aisle, smiling without blinking. It got worse. Another driver quit mid-route, parked his rig at a rest stop, walked away, and never picked up another load. Said he heard scratching from inside the pallets. Said the voice followed him all the way back to the truck. Hello, hello, hello. Still, dispatch kept sending us there. The deliveries had to go out. That's the thing about logistics. It doesn't matter if you're afraid. The load has to move. But I started to notice something else, something more disturbing. The stories were changing. What began as subtle noises, shadows, and whispers had evolved into more direct encounters. Items falling from shelves, radios exploding with static and screams. One guy swore the lights went out entirely. And when they flicked back on, every box in the aisle had shifted. None of it made sense. But everyone who returned from that store came back. Different. Quieter. Jumpy. Like something had latched onto them. And then there were the coins. I found one again, weeks later, inside the glove box of a truck I hadn't driven since the Coldwell delivery. Same size, same shimmer. Impossible. I hadn't picked it up. I know I hadn't. But there it was, resting on a folded fuel receipt, waiting. I tossed it out the window, watched it vanish into the gravel, heart pounding. But sometimes when I'm fueling up late at night, I still hear it, the faint sound of metal tapping concrete. Ping, ping. These days, I drive different routes. I stay away from the isolated stops, the long stretches of nothing where the dark closes in too tight. I keep the cab lit. I check my mirrors more than I should, and I never ever ignore a cold shiver running down my spine. Because if there's one thing this job has taught me, it's that not every haunted place looks the part. Sometimes it's just a warehouse with fluorescent lights and loading docks. Sometimes the scariest places wear the plainest faces. And sometimes the things that watch us from the shadows aren't waiting to be noticed. They're waiting for us to come back. It was supposed to be a routine drive through the quiet Norwegian countryside. Nothing unusual, just another night on the road between Hønefoss and Jevnaker. But what I encountered in the darkness that evening still lingers in the back of my mind. A man in a yellow raincoat standing in the middle of the highway, trying to force his way into passing cars. Who was he? What was he running from?
And why did he seem more lost than dangerous? What happened next, I'll never forget. The rain had been steady for over an hour, drumming against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists. It wasn't a storm, not exactly, just that cold, relentless Norwegian drizzle that blurred your vision and soaked you to the bone if you stepped outside for even a moment. I was heading from Hunefoss to Jevnaker, a route I'd taken countless times. I knew every bend, every stretch of dark asphalt flanked by thick forests and empty fields. It was supposed to be just another quiet night drive. But as I crested a gentle hill and started down a long, dimly lit stretch of highway, my headlights picked up something, no, someone, standing in the road. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or maybe a reflective traffic marker. But as I got closer, my heart began to pound. A man, in a yellow raincoat, standing dead center in my lane. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, staring at my truck like he'd been waiting for me. I hit the brakes, hard. The tires squealed against the wet road, and I felt the back end of the vehicle twitch slightly before regaining grip. I managed to stop a good 20 meters from him, but instead of stepping aside or waving me down like any rational person would, the man turned and started walking toward me. That's when I saw him reach for the handle of the car in front of me, a small hatchback. The driver must have seen him too, because the car suddenly swerved and sped away, tires spitting water in panic. The man didn't flinch. He simply moved on to the next vehicle behind it, then another, trying door after door, systematically, like he was looking for something or someone. And that's when the fear truly set in. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't acting like someone who needed help. His movements were too deliberate, too calm in the chaos, like he knew exactly what he was doing. I locked my doors without thinking, hands slick with sweat despite the chill. My hazard lights clicked steadily in the background, the rhythmic sound unnerving in the tense silence. The man was now just a few cars away, still checking doors, oblivious to the growing terror around him. It wasn't just that he was trying to get in, it was how out of place he looked. The yellow raincoat, drenched and clinging to his thin frame, the way his head tilted slightly, unnaturally, as if he were listening for something no one else could hear. His eyes never met anyone's, not even mine. By the time he reached the car beside me, I was frozen, not from the cold, from something deeper, primal, that instinctive sense that something was terribly wrong, and I had no idea what I was about to let into my life. I don't know what made me do it. Curiosity, instinct, or maybe some misplaced sense of responsibility. But when the man finally reached my truck, I didn't drive away like the others. I kept the engine running, doors locked, and slowly rolled down the window just a few inches, enough to hear him. Or so I thought. He didn't speak. He didn't plead for help or say he was in trouble. He just stood there, soaked to the skin, staring at me with eyes that seemed completely vacant, void of panic, void of fear, just gone, like he wasn't fully there. "Are you okay?" I asked cautiously, keeping one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near the lock button. No answer. Only a faint sound escaped his mouth, a dry, raspy exhale, like someone trying to remember how to breathe. Then his hand rose slowly, fingers trembling, and he placed it flat against the window. I flinched. His palm left a wet print, his nails chipped and dirty, as though he'd clawed at something recently, or someone. He looked young, mid-30s maybe, but everything about him felt aged, weathered, not just by the rain, but by something deeper. Trauma, perhaps, or madness. For a brief moment, we just stared at each other. I didn't know what he wanted. I couldn't even tell if he was truly seeing me. There was no recognition in his expression, no urgency, just that eerie stillness that made my skin crawl. Then, without warning, he moved. Not quickly, not aggressively, but with that same eerie calmness. He walked to the passenger side and tried the door handle. Locked. I felt my entire body tense. Then the rear door, also locked. Then he circled to the back of the truck, out of sight. I shifted into gear immediately, heart racing.
Was he trying to get in the sleeper cab? Was he hiding back there? I couldn't take any chances. I was about to drive off when I heard it. 3 loud, slow knocks on the back panel. Not random, deliberate, like a signal. Knock, knock, knock. I stared into the rearview mirror, expecting to see his shadow, or worse, but there was nothing, just the endless drizzle and the faint blinking of my hazard lights. Panic was clawing at my chest now. I jumped out, grabbing my flashlight, determined to confront whatever this was. But when I rounded the side of the truck, he wasn't there. He had vanished. I checked under the trailer, behind the wheels, even scanned the dark tree line near the edge of the rest stop. Nothing. And then I felt it. A presence, like eyes on my back, not physical but heavy, suffocating, like I'd just stepped into something ancient and unexplainable. I got back in the truck and locked the doors so fast I almost jammed the latch. I told myself he was just a man, just another lost soul in the wrong place. But the way he moved, the way he looked right through me, no. This was something else, something I should have never engaged with. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left the rest stop, sped away really, heart pounding and hands shaking, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Every flicker of light on the road, every shadow cast by my own headlights seemed to move with intent. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see the man in the yellow raincoat sitting calmly in the back seat, even though I knew that was impossible. At least I hoped it was. But that eerie knocking, the rhythm of it, kept repeating in my head, over and over. Knock, knock, knock. I kept telling myself it was just a strange encounter. Maybe the guy was mentally unstable. Maybe he needed help. But something didn't add up. Why didn't he speak? Why did he vanish so suddenly, leaving no trace? Why did the air around him feel so wrong? By the time I reached the next town, it was well past midnight. I pulled into a truck stop, parked near a row of other sleeping semis, and tried to calm myself down. I even laughed a little, trying to shake off the fear. But the relief didn't last, because when I walked around to check my trailer before calling it a night, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were muddy handprints, faint, smeared but unmistakably human, on the back door of the trailer. And not just one, at least 5. Each about the same size as the man's palm from earlier, as if he had followed me, as if he had held on for the ride. That's when I realized I had never actually checked the trailer itself. Swallowing my fear, I unlocked the latch and slowly swung open the heavy doors. My flashlight cut through the darkness inside, revealing only the familiar rows of secured freight. Everything looked undisturbed, but the air was different, heavy, stagnant, and there was a smell, something faint but sharp. Wet clothes, mold, or something else? I shut the doors quickly and backed away. For the rest of the night, I sat in the cab with every light on, windows closed tight, and the engine idling low. I couldn't explain why, but I was certain that opening the trailer had invited something in, or maybe just confirmed what had already gotten in earlier. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were broken and strange. I saw the man's face, pale, water dripping from his chin, eyes wide and empty. He didn't move in the dream. He just stood there, watching. And when I woke up, gasping for air and soaked in sweat, there was condensation on the inside of my windshield. 3 long streaks, as if someone had run their fingers down the glass from the passenger side. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. Not anymore. The next few days blurred into one long, sleepless stretch of paranoia. I drove through towns, across empty highways, past diners and gas stations, but I never truly felt present. My mind was stuck in that rain-soaked moment, in the stillness of that man's gaze. Every reflection in my mirrors made my stomach twist. Every unfamiliar sound in the cab had me turning my head. I started avoiding rest stops entirely, but the worst part was the dreams. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back at that rest stop. The same cold wind, the same flickering lights, the same yellow coat.
Only this time, I was the one knocking on someone else's door, lost, desperate, and ignored. One night, maybe 4 days after it all began, I parked in a well-lit lot behind a trucker diner in Kansas. It was busy, loud, the kind of place where you could pretend nothing strange had ever happened to you. I grabbed a booth, ordered coffee, and tried to drown the thoughts with noise and caffeine. That's when I overheard another driver talking at the next table. "Yeah, old Highway 9, just before the county line," he said, gesturing with his spoon. "Real bad stretch. Couple drivers went missing last year, always in the rain. Same spot. They say a guy in a yellow slicker's been seen walking the shoulder." My blood turned to ice. I leaned over, interrupting. "Did you say yellow raincoat?" The man nodded, surprised. "Yeah, why?" I didn't answer. I just sat there, heart pounding. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the first. I didn't sleep that night either. But it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was something else. A gnawing, guilty feeling. I had seen something, someone, not entirely human. A presence stuck between places, reaching out, and I hadn't helped. In my mind, I kept hearing that knock. The one on my trailer, the one on my soul. Knock, knock, knock. Weeks passed. I never saw the man again. But I started keeping an emergency kit for strangers. Bottled water, blankets, a first aid kit, flashlight. I even added a second dash cam, just in case. Maybe it was for them. Maybe it was for me. Somewhere along the line, I stopped asking whether he was real, whether he was a ghost, a hallucination, or something far darker. I started asking something more important. What if it was me out there one day, cold, alone, knocking, and would anyone stop? We like to think the road is just pavement and miles, but there are places out there, forgotten places, where time folds in on itself and echoes cry through the rain. If you're lucky, you'll never stop there. But if you do, and someone knocks on your window, don't pretend you don't hear it. I never thought my regular night haul through Maryland would turn into something out of a crime scene. Just minutes before merging onto I-270, I saw flashing brake lights and figured it was just another roadside stall. But nothing could have prepared me for what lay directly in my path. A motionless body sprawled across the exit lane. Was he alive? Did I hit him? What happened next still gives me chills every time I think about it. It all started like any other night. I was heading south on I-15, keeping steady at the speed limit, 55 miles per hour. The road was familiar, the kind I could almost drive with my eyes closed, though of course I never would. There was nothing particularly strange at first, just darkness, the hum of my engine, and the quiet focus of a long-haul driver trying to make good time. But as I approached the point where I-15 splits toward 270, something changed. I noticed a string of brake lights ahead, several vehicles slowing down. Some even had their hazard lights blinking. That alone was odd. On this stretch of highway, people usually flew past like they were racing time itself. Instinctively, I flicked on my flashers and began easing up on the gas, foot hovering over the brake pedal. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a piece of debris. Maybe a large trash bag, a blown-out tire, something someone lost off the back of their truck. But as my headlights swept forward, illuminating the shoulder and the start of the right exit lane, I realized it wasn't debris. It was a body. A man was lying right in the middle of the lane, completely still, arms twisted unnaturally, head partially under the guardrail. He was positioned perpendicular to the road, like someone had just dropped him there. For a split second, my heart stopped. I thought I was looking at a corpse. There was no time to process, only react. I'd already passed him by the time I fully registered what I was seeing, but I slammed on the brakes, steering across 2 lanes to block off the area behind me. I hoped other drivers would see the flashing lights and think, something's wrong, better slow down. But in that moment, I felt sick. My pulse was pounding in my ears. My mind raced with a single terrifying question. Did I hit him? It was hard to tell.
He was so close to the white line. I hadn't seen him until the very last second, and the fear that I might have somehow struck a man without knowing, that thought wrapped itself around my chest and squeezed. I threw open the door and stumbled out, fumbling for my phone as I nearly dropped it straight into oncoming traffic. My boots hit the pavement and I ran, toward the body, toward the possibility of something I couldn't undo. As I got closer, every step felt like it was taking me deeper into a nightmare. The cold air bit at my face, but I barely noticed. My eyes were locked on the figure sprawled on the asphalt. He wasn't moving, not a twitch, not a breath I could see. I knelt down beside him, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. His head was just past the white line, tucked partially under the guardrail. His legs stretched out across the lane. He looked broken, like a mannequin discarded in the middle of a dark road. I reached out, hesitating for a split second. What if he was already gone? What if I touched him and he was cold? Just as I was about to check for a pulse, I noticed the rise and fall of his chest. Faint, but there. He was breathing, alive. A wave of something, not quite relief, not quite fear, crashed over me. I snatched up my phone again, hands shaking, and dialed 911. My voice cracked as I gave them my location and blurted out what I was seeing. There's a man. He's lying in the road. I didn't hit him. He's breathing. He's alive. Please, send someone. The dispatcher asked for more details, but I could barely focus. My eyes kept darting toward the traffic behind me, praying that no one would come barreling down the lane. My truck blocked most of it, but not all. One wrong move from a distracted driver and we'd both be flattened. And then, out of nowhere, two figures emerged from the shadows. At first, I tensed, unsure if I was about to deal with something worse. But as they approached, I saw the glint of badges and recognized the calm, focused expressions of professionals, off-duty paramedics. By some insane stroke of luck, both just happened to be passing by. I stepped back and let them take over. One dropped to his knees and began assessing the man. The other asked me questions. How long had he been there? Had I seen the accident? Did I notice any other vehicles involved? I answered what I could, still shaking, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The smell hit me then, sharp, unmistakable. Alcohol. It clung to the air around the unconscious man, sour and thick. The pieces were coming together. A drunk pedestrian? Or maybe someone thrown from a vehicle? I didn't know. I still don't. Soon, flashing lights bathed the highway in red and blue. The real paramedics arrived, followed by a local police officer. I stood off to the side, arms crossed, trying to hold myself together. I kept replaying it in my head. The headlights, the body, the fear that I'd run someone over and hadn't even realized. The officer came over, notebook in hand, and asked for my name. I gave it, along with everything I'd just experienced. My words came out in a rush, trauma spilling over before I could stop it. She listened carefully, nodded, and thanked me for stopping, for thinking fast and doing what I could to keep others from hitting him. I wanted to believe I'd done the right thing, but a darker question lingered in the back of my mind. What if I had been just 2 seconds later? Would I have seen him in time? Or would I have been the one to end his story before it ever had a chance to continue? The flashing lights were multiplying now. First paramedics, then a local police cruiser, and finally a state trooper. The scene that had started with just me and a body in the dark had become a full-blown emergency response zone. But somehow, in the middle of all the commotion, I felt more alone than ever. I was still shaking. My arms were crossed tightly against my chest, like I was trying to hold myself together physically, because emotionally, I was unraveling. The local cop who had first arrived had thanked me, said I did the right thing, but it didn't feel like enough. I kept imagining other scenarios, cars speeding through, tires hitting flesh and bone, headlights illuminating something far worse than what I'd seen. That lingering dread clung to me like fog. And then the trooper arrived. He didn't walk. He marched, straight for me.
his expression unreadable, professional, but firm. I already had my ID out, trying to be proactive, trying to seem calm even though my heart was thudding like it wanted out of my chest. He took my license without a word, then veered off to inspect the front of my truck. I heard him call in the tag number on his radio. My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't hit the guy. I was sure of it. But when you see someone lying in the road like that, unconscious, twisted, covered in snow and grime, your brain starts to betray you. Doubt creeps in through every crack. What if I had hit him and didn't realize? What if I was wrong? I stepped forward, voice trembling, and said, "Hey, I didn't hit him, by the way." The trooper turned slightly. "So you hit him, right?" No. My words stumbled over themselves. I saw him lying there and I stopped, I swear. Panic took over. My thoughts were racing faster than I could speak. I imagined handcuffs, headlines, courtrooms. I imagined my company dropping me, my reputation trashed, my life upended, all because I tried to do the right thing. And then, like a miracle, a voice broke through the chaos. A witness. A man stepped forward and said, "No, the car that hit him was a minivan. It's just up ahead." Time stopped. For a second, everything froze. And then I breathed again. The trooper nodded and moved on. No apology, no reaction, just on to the next task. But that brief moment, that instant where the weight of blame teetered on my shoulders, it left a mark. Even now, I remember that exact sensation, how close fear sits next to guilt, how fast a good deed can be mistaken for something criminal. But once the witness spoke up, everything shifted. I wasn't the suspect anymore. I was just a guy who had stumbled onto someone else's chaos and tried to keep it from getting worse. The trooper moved on, and the tension began to unravel. Not all at once, but like a tight rope slowly going slack. The medics loaded the injured man into the ambulance. He was still breathing, still unconscious, still reeking of alcohol. No one knew yet who he was, where he came from, or how he ended up face down in the middle of the highway exit. But he was alive. The paramedics had said that if he'd lain there even 5 more minutes, hypothermia or another passing car could have ended him. 5 minutes. That's all it would have taken for the story to end differently. For me to find not a man clinging to life, but a lifeless body, or worse, to have been the one who made it lifeless. I stood by the guardrail for a while after it all calmed down, watching the lights flash against the concrete and steel, thinking about how thin the line is between ordinary and life-changing, between going home after a shift and having your life forever altered by a single moment. Eventually, the police took my statement, thanked me again, and said I was free to go. I climbed back into my cab, shut the door, and sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't until I looked at the passenger seat, the phone I had dropped, the half-drunk coffee still warm, the CB radio blinking softly, that I realized just how close I had been to something much darker, something irreversible. That night, I didn't finish my route. I pulled into a rest stop, turned off the engine, and just sat. For hours. Not sleeping, not talking, just sitting with the weight of it. Since then, I've thought about that night more times than I can count. It's not something you shake off, not really. And I don't know what happened to the man I found. Maybe he walked away from that with a second chance. Maybe he never even knew how close he came to being just another statistic. But I know what I walked away with. A reminder that sometimes doing the right thing means putting yourself in the line of fear, of doubt, of being misunderstood. That you can go from driver to suspect to witness in the span of minutes, and still not be sure you did everything right. But you stopped. And in this world, especially on the highway where everyone's always in a rush to get somewhere, maybe the act of stopping is enough. Maybe that's what makes all the difference. I've been working for a rural waste management company in Pennsylvania for about 8 years now. Most people think garbage collection is just a morning gig, but in the dead heat of summer, we start early, real early, so we're not boiling alive by midday.
I clock in at 2 a.m. before the sun even dreams of rising. There's a strange kind of peace to being on the road when no one else is. You get used to the silence, the fog rolling across the hills, the way deer dart across in your high beams like ghosts in flight. I used to think nothing out there could scare me. But then came that night on Route 209, a night that still gnaws at me like teeth in the dark. It happened in late July, humid and moonless. Just after 3 a.m., I was on one of the back roads near Cressona. No streetlights, barely any houses, just trees pressing in on both sides like an overgrown tunnel. I had music playing low, windows cracked open. Everything was as normal as it gets, until I saw them. At first, it was just a dark shape in the distance, something that broke the flow of the white lines and asphalt. As I got closer, my headlights picked out the outline, a person, crouched or sitting in the exact center of the road, not on the shoulder, not walking, just sitting there, like the road was their living room and I was the intruder. They wore a hoodie, the kind that shadowed your face completely in the right light, or lack thereof. Their hands were on their knees. They were facing directly toward me, and they weren't moving. At first, I slowed down out of instinct. Maybe someone had crashed their car or needed help. My stomach turned when I realized there were no vehicles around, no wreckage, no flashlight, just this one figure, motionless and unnatural. I crept forward until I was maybe 10 yards away, my brights shining directly at them. Still no movement. I honked, short, then long blasts. Then I hit the air horn, the one that makes people jump a foot in the air. Nothing. No flinch, no glance, not even a twitch. They just sat there. That's when the fear really hit. You ever feel your animal brain kick in before your logical brain can form a thought? That primal alert that says, "This is wrong, leave now." I felt it deep in my spine. Every inch of me told me to back away. I didn't ask questions. I didn't lean out the window. I didn't even consider stepping out of the cab. I grabbed the gear shift, slammed it into reverse, and slowly backed away, headlights still aimed at the thing sitting in the road. For a moment, I expected it to rise and charge, or vanish, or something, but it didn't. It stayed completely still as I reversed down the road, like it wanted me to keep watching. When I was far enough to breathe again, I threw the truck into drive and took the first turn I saw, nearly skidding off the gravel shoulder. I didn't care. I didn't even radio it in. What was I going to say? "Hey, dispatch, there's a hoodie person blocking the road who doesn't move when I honk." No one would believe me. Hell, I barely believed it myself. I thought about it every night after that. I even drove back the same route a few days later, in broad daylight, just to prove to myself it was nothing. There was nothing there. No footprints, no accident site, no trash or debris that might have looked like a person in the dark. But I swear, I know what I saw. For weeks, I'd jolt awake around 3 a.m., gasping, sometimes certain that I'd hear knuckles rapping on the driver's side window. Once, I dreamed I was stuck in the truck with no reverse, no brakes, and the figure slowly rising as I rolled closer, hoodie still hiding its face. Eventually, I told a guy I work with, Marty, a veteran of the job. Real quiet, drinks a lot of black coffee, doesn't say much unless it's important. He listened without interrupting, nodded slowly and said, "You didn't get out, right?" "No, God no." He sipped his coffee and gave me a look that said more than words ever could. Then, with a voice low and serious, he added, "Good. Someone sat in the road like that a few years ago, not far from Schuylkill Haven. Another driver got out to check, didn't come back. Cops found the truck still idling, door wide open, never found him." I stared at him. "You're messing with me." I wish I was. He finished his coffee and walked off. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I stepped out of the truck that night. What would I have seen under that hood? A face, a void? Maybe it was someone playing a sick prank. Or maybe it wasn't someone at all. I think that's what scares me the most. Not what I saw, but what I didn't. The lack of any human reaction, any logic or reason. It wasn't just eerie, it was wrong. Like it didn't belong to our world, or like it was waiting for something. I've since changed routes. I don't drive Route 209 anymore, especially not after midnight. I try not to think about what's still out there, but every now and then, when I'm on a back road and the fog rolls in thick, I find myself tapping the horn, just in case. Some things in this world can't be explained, and not everything out there wants to be found or understood. If your gut tells you to run, listen. Fear is there for a reason, because sometimes when you see something that doesn't move, doesn't flinch, doesn't feel human, it's because it isn't. And the road doesn't always lead you away from danger. Sometimes it brings you right to it.